Hello everybody, and thank you for returning to part 2 of the brake lathe machine. Today we're going to be resurfacing some brake rotors. In the other video we did some drums, so let's get it started. In the first segment of the video, I was trying to get in the visual of the camera of me pulling my hair back away from moving parts and making sure my safety glasses were on. But as you can see, it didn't make the cut. So anyways, you want to make sure your work area is clean. Clean your machine, clean off anywhere you see any debris of metal particles. Just make sure everything is nice and clean. The next thing you want to do is take your balancer and place it on the brake lathe machine. After that, you find your rotor and you grab your rotor and you're going to attach it to your two-way chuck. You want to make sure this is very secure, because if you pick this up and this fall on your foot, chances are you're not going to have a good day. Not going to have a good one. As you can see here, I am locking down the rotor to the two-way chuck with the chuck key. And you always pick it up from the bottom. Please always remember to pick it up from the bottom and not the rotor. So you take your time and you slide it on the brake lathe machine. Make sure there's not any metal particles inside the two-way chuck. The device I grabbed here is a vibration dampener. As you can see, I was having a little trouble getting it on because there was some metal fragments inside. So grab my little trusty rag, you clean it out, try it again, and make sure everything is clean, it's free of debris and everything. Boom, right there. Then we have another one. And as you can see, I have the locking nut in hand too. That locking nut, you got to remember, is reverse threads. So it's not lefty loosey, righty tighty. It's the opposite. So always remember that. So after you have everything in place and snug down with your reverse locking nut, you find you a wrench so you can gently snug everything down on the brake lathe machine. But one of my classmates were currently using the wrench, so I decided to proceed on to the two-way cutting tool. And boom, there's my wrench. Boom, boom. Good. All right, now back to the two-way chuck. As you can see, I'm trying to get it lined up perfect with the rotor, which takes a little time, so I ain't finna make y'all sit here and watch all of that. I'm gonna fast forward through that a little bit. Now that I have a baseline setup of the brake lathe machine with the rotor, I'm going to attach the balancing belt. This belt plays a key role because it keeps the vibration down on the rotor while it's on the brake lathe machine. You don't want any vibration or anything going on when you're resurfacing the rotors that could damage and potentially mess up the whole rotor itself. After installing the belt around the rotor, I give the machine a test run to make sure all the parts are locked in place and nothing can sling apart in the process. Now here, I'm setting up my machine a little more so I can get my cutting blades more in sync with the brake rotor so I can get a nice clean cut on my first cut. Always want to make sure you take your time with the cutting blades because they are very delicate and can be damaged very easily. A damaged cutting blade will not give you a good, nice, clean cut. That resurface will be rough and you will have to start all over again and possibly buy the client new rotors. This process took a little time, so I fast forwarded a little bit so you didn't have to see all this boring stuff, but it took a little while to get the tool lined up because the bits were kind of like turned on an angle a little bit, so I kept trying to finesse and finesse. Got to this point where I was trying to explain to my instructor what was happening with the cutting blades. So he decided to come over and show me what was going on. He's like, "Oh, I see what you got going on here. You got to finagle a little bit." But nah, I just needed to turn the tool a little bit on the angle, so I released the locking nut that holds the two-way cutting blade in place, finessed it a little bit, and boom, I was in there. Now at this point, I'm just going over making sure my adjustment is right before I start the machine, making sure my locking nut is locked back down in place. You don't want your cutting blades to be moving around on the rotor as you're doing a cut. That's bad. So I'm looking at everything, bringing my tool bits in on the rotor, making sure it touches gently. You don't want to go in too aggressive. You can damage the bits. You can damage the rotor. Remember that. Pay attention. Focus. Slow down. After I made sure my bits and everything was locked in place and lined up, I begin my first cut. Your first cut is always like a rough draft, is your rough cut, so it's quite speedy compared to the second and third cut if you have to do a third cut in some cases. As you can see, I try to keep the area clean as much as possible from all slinging metal debris. As you can see, we got completed with the first cut, so now we put the machine back in neutral, and you take your cross feed and you're going to move your cutting bits back into the rotor to where they first started. You take your device and you gently turn it in again where your bits gently tap the rotor, and then you start your last cut, which will be your slow cut. This cut will be a lot cleaner and it will take a lot longer, being that the surface is going to be nice and smooth when it's done. Okay, this process is a little lengthy, so I ended up trimming down a little bit so you didn't have to see all of that craziness and me running my mouth with my classmate. After you've cleaned your last cut, you turn off your machine, inspect your rotor, and then you're going to break everything down in a reverse order and make sure your area is nice and clean and free of any debris the way you found it before the next occupant come and use the machine. Surfacing procedure is done. Remove your rotor from the two-way chuck, inspect your rotor, and if everything is green for go, install on the vehicle, and that's it.